And I said, well, I found several things. I found my mortgage trading on the stock exchange, Your Honour. What do you think of that? And he goes, well, an offer and acceptance is good enough. So I said, okay, Your Honour, so you're now wiping out contract law in Ireland. An offer and acceptance is good enough now. Because once you remember where you are, the commercial courts are the bank's courts. And they can make up the law and change it as they wish. And I talked about the law that Jonathan Sugarman was talking about early on, 5 years imprisonment. Well, the financial regulator, it was his job to check, was this all done and above board, and it was to stop us getting into this mess. And while I think he should have been arrested and put in prison for treason, somehow we were tricked into giving him 600,000 euros for a job well done and send him off to the Bahamas. And while I don't think the new guy, Matthew Elderfield, is a particularly bad guy, he was the regulator in England when Northern Rock went to the wall. And when he came here, he brought out a new law. So we have one in 2006, which was before the crash, that puts most bankers in jail for 5 years. And because they couldn't allow that happen, he brought out a new document, 2009. I have both documents, I have the originals that we bring to court. The 2009 document is a mirror image of the 2006 document. They're almost exactly the same, except for when you go down through the headings. There's just one thing missing from the 2009, and that's an implementation date. How strange is that they bring out a law with no implementation date? And that's again treating the Irish people as ticks. Like, just show them a law and tell them, oh, 5 years in prison, yeah, but that's 2009. And in this it talks about the previous law back in the 1970s. It doesn't mention the 2006 law. And, you know, these are the huge problems that I have with the con that's being played on us all. Like, I'm only into fairness and justice, and that's it. I'm not against banks, but I'm certainly against people being pulled out of their house when they're being conned. That I don't know, because, like, as I say, I don't claim to be an expert on anything. These are just stuff that I have found out over the last year and a half by checking, and I'm in the courts the whole time. But in general, the courts, the commercial courts, they can make it up as they go along. I mean, I've seen them saying, well, they sold it, so what? You still have to pay them. And I'm thinking, well, you're telling me if somebody already got paid for something, they can go back into court and still demand the money again? I could have made a lot of money. Yeah. No, it's not that the Irish... Oh, yeah, no, I'm not saying Irish people are thick. They treat us like we're thick. That's what I find offensive.
I think we need to find out how other countries.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, you would think, wouldn't you? I mean, and that's what I'm fighting for, is to try to get a little bit of justice. So I'll play a little bit here because, as I say, our memories aren't great. Because when they started bailing out these banks, the reason, and I went a bit off the track, the reason that people say, well, why didn't any of us do anything till now, is because if you remember at the time, the Fianna Fáil government was like the sick man in Ireland. We all knew they were dying, and it was just a matter of time. So Fine Gael and Labour were like this dog chomping on a bit to get into government because of the crazy things Fianna Fáil were doing about paying back bondholders. So I'll give you just a little memory of it if you can. Here we go.
All I can say to the Irish people, who some of whom may be watching tonight, is that if things go our way, there will be a new government in 6 weeks' time, and the banks aren't getting another cent. Anglo-Irish Bank is not getting another cent of our money. And any bank coming to us looking for more money is going to have to show how they're going to impose losses on their junior bondholders, on their senior bondholders, and their other creditors before they come looking to us for any more money, not another cent.
Right. See, it's important to do that because maybe it's my age or maybe it is the fluoride in the water, but I need to kind of play that again because that's like, oh yeah, I remember that now. And I think that's what they rely on, you know, because after a while, I think we do forget promises made. And I know people say, oh, politicians lie the whole time. And, you know, that's fine. And maybe, you know, should we accept that? And if we do, maybe that's our fault. Like, I haven't voted since my early 20s, and there's a real good reason for it. It's because of this bullshit, you know, and everybody says, no, politicians always lie. Well, should we accept that? And if they were lying and it was just about a bus run for a school kid somewhere and they couldn't promise and deliver it, okay, fair enough. But I think this is the biggest disaster to hit our country since the formation of the state. And it's the most taxing debt ever put on us since the formation of the state. And if you think the few evictions you see now, you want to see what's coming down the road. And also, we had a mathematician in America who advised the Reagan administration. He's helping us with the court case in some of the areas that we're bringing against the government. And he has worked out that we will default. We will default, make no bones about it. And because I go around saying it, you will hear them now starting to say it on radio and TV. Mark my words, we will default again, and we will need another bailout. Now, I'm not claiming to be a big businessman or anything like that. I only run a small business and it's really on its knees, so maybe I'm not so good at doing business. But if you ran the country as a business and you're in trouble, and you go to the bank manager and say, I can't pay back my loan. How about giving me another loan to pay back that loan? I mean, in business terms, I mean, most people who have small businesses they know that, look, that's ridiculous. Why do we do that as a country then, if, you know, the country really should be run as a business, right? I mean, it would be crazy to keep going back to the bank and say, look, I'm fucked, I can't pay that. It gives you another loan, bigger one. It's crazy, we're just allowing this to go on, but we're top of the class. We got the gold star from Enda, and we're top of the class.
Tomorrow, one of the world's most spectacularly bust banks will repay in full a bond worth $1 billion. This is an unsecured bond. It is covered by no government guarantee. It was issued by the Anglo-Irish Bank of Sean Fitzpatrick to finance the unsustainable loans to property developers that would cripple the nation. Now, the corpse of Anglo renamed the IBRC as having to pay its debts from beyond the grave with our money.
If the Anglo bondholders are paid, they'll be paid from their own resources. It's not going to come from the taxpayer.
What's happening in relation to the Anglo bondholders is they'll be paid from Anglo's own resources. Anglo has none of its own resources, does it?
No. It has its current assets and liabilities. We rely for funding entirely on public authorities.
Of all the aspects of this crisis that seem grossly unfair, few have caught the public imagination in the way that paying the debts of Anglo-Irish Bank has. That the multi-billion euro debts of Sean Fitzpatrick's Anglo should be laid at the door of the taxpayer simply seems profoundly wrong.
So the principles of democracy have been violated because the people of Ireland have been forced to repay those bonds without being asked to consent to that. The government is refusing to carry out the referendum, is refusing to put to direct vote of the people that decision. And as a result of that, this is undemocratic decision.
The Anglo bondholders are paid, they'll be paid from their own resources.
Anglo has none of its own resources, does it?
No.
The government failed to guarantee a burden sharing arrangement for non-guaranteed bank debt as part of the bailout arrangements. Ireland's commitments on sovereign debt must be honoured in full. Ireland's commitments on debt under guarantee must be honoured in full. What legal or moral compulsion is on Ireland, however, to honour in full debt incurred by Irish banks when there was no state involvement in the arrangements. These loans were entered into freely by willing lenders and willing borrowers with absolutely no state participation. The interest rate charged represented the risk at the time, and there never was a state liability. It is obscene that liability for these loans is now being transferred to the Irish taxpayer and in many respects to the poorest of the Irish taxpayers. There is 10 billion of subordinated debt in the Irish banks. There is 15 billion of non-guaranteed senior debt. The Irish government and the Irish taxpayer has no liability whatsoever for these debts. But the bailout deal is now forcing them to accept liability because the bailout deal puts this imposition on them. So the Minister, in his budget, reduces social welfare payments. He punishes the blind, the disabled, the widows, the carers, the unemployed. He taxes the poorest at work. And for what? So that the taxpayers can take on the liability for debts that the country never incurred and that arose from private arrangements between private institutions. What a disaster, what an obscenity. How can the government stand over it? How can our European colleagues stand over it? When the deal was agreed, there was an attempt to justify it because any renegotiation of bank debt in Ireland could have a major adverse effects on those banks in Germany, France and the UK that had lent to the Irish banks. This consideration may have been valid some time ago, but it is no longer valid. The latest available bank data has shown that Irish guaranteed bank debt has been sold on at a discount to hedge funds in the USA and the UK and Luxembourg, as well as to smaller speculative investors. If you're interested in the data, Minister, you'll find it through Clearstream and Euroclear, and you can track the sales of bonds at discounts right across. And they're no longer being held by the European banks that lent in the first instance. They're in the possession of hedge funds now, and you can find their names on those two sites. If 25%, if for example a hedge fund buys Irish unguaranteed bank debt at 80 cents in the euro, it stands to make 25% on its investment if Ireland continues to redeem the debt at par. The position has now become indefensible that the Irish taxpayer, even the poorest taxpayers, should be required to underpin the speculation of hedge fund investors. There must be burden sharing of bank debt, transparent, open, negotiated burden sharing. It must deal with both subordinate debt and non-guaranteed senior debt. And if you want to find the origin of the phrase burden sharing, it was Jean-Paul Trichet himself that used it in the first instance as chairman of the Paris Club, which was the first international institution involved in the discounting of debt. Right. If the EU finds this approach unacceptable for fear of a knock-on effect in Europe, and if the Irish taxpayer is expected to underpin the banking system in other member states, then where is the quid pro quo? Where was the quid pro quo in the negotiation? The Icelandic government has negotiated 15-year money at 3.2% from the UK and Dutch governments for their bank bailout. Ireland is being charged 5.8%, and at least one tranche of EU funding has a built-in profit margin of 2.9%. This is not solidarity. This is not in accordance with the spirit of Article 122 of the treaty. The government's negotiation has led to a very bad result and a very bad deal. The deal needs to be renegotiated, Minister, and Fine Gael in the election will look for a mandate to do so.
Thank you very much, Deputy Noonan.
So you can see no one seems to know what's going on, and this worries me because, like, I'm the electrician, I don't know what's going on either. But I know one thing for sure, that they don't know what's going on. And as a small business guy, I know that you can't keep going back to a bank when you can't pay the first loan, looking for the second loan and another loan. That to me is crazy. And what they're doing then is selling all our natural resources. You know, they're selling everything. It's like wholesale, sell everything. This is the only plan we have. Is like, you know, if I'm in a small business and I need my van for work, I said, well, I have to pay the bank, so I'll sell the van. And then I'll try to pay the rest of the loan. And then I have a bag of tools here, so I'll sell that. And I'm selling everything that actually makes money for us. To me, it's just ridiculous. I'm not saying I have the answers, but there's a few things we can try. Now, I don't know if anybody wants to know anything about receivers or anything like that. Does that interest anybody? No? No, okay, I won't talk about receivers. Just to say that we always sack the receiver when we get one on our property somewhere. Okay, so I'm just going to just talk for a little bit about direct democracy, and Ray will talk about that then, I think, at the end. Oh, you're going after me, aren't you? Yeah. So, direct democracy, before anybody starts going, not a political party, please. Direct democracy is something that I firmly believe in. And Ray will speak about why, and then you'll understand. But basically, it's democracy that you've never seen before. because I'm old enough to know that I've never seen it before either.